Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm and hearty welcome to our panel discussion on wheat-related disorders and autism. We at JMitra are proud to have you all here, and this eminent panel of speakers today would put any medical body to shame, given the vast expanse of knowledge and experience that they come with. Now, autism or autism spectrum disorder, ASD, is a neurodevelopmental disorder that affects social interaction, communication, and behavior, among others. Right? In India, as a population of 1.3 billion people, it is severely underreported. Also underreported, I believe, and also one of the beliefs of this panel is the linkages between wheat-related disorders or the food we eat to autism and managing autism in the long term. I'm very pleased to have with us today as part of our panel was Dr. Tom O'Bryan, Chief Health Officer of Knowing Dr. Deepak Gupta, a founder director for the Center of Child and Adolescent Wellbeings and a senior consultant at Sir Gangaram Hospital in New Delhi. Dr. Natasha Campbell-McBride from the UK, an expert author and physician, doctor in the field of autism. Ms. Christina Adams, an author, researcher, global autism and camel milk expert. Our panelist, Ms. Ishi Khosla, the founder of the Celiac Society of India and a leading clinical nutritionist in Delhi. And our moderator for the evening today, Dr. Amrita Panda from Calcutta, a rehabilitation psychologist, founder and managing director of the Pranjani Foundation. Before we go forward, I'd like to ask Ms. Anju Khosla to give a small brief and introduction to the CSI and the work that they do before handing it over to Dr. Amrita Panda. Over to you, ma'am.
Thanks, Arjun. On behalf of the Celiac Society of India, I'd like to thank our esteemed panelists for joining us tonight. A very warm welcome to the audience, and I can assure you this promises to be a path-breaking session. The Celiac Society of India works towards increasing awareness in the early diagnosis and management of celiac disease and wheat-related disorders. I urge you to visit our website, celiacsocietyofIndia.com, to find out more about our activities. We do come out with a quarterly newsletter called Wheat Views, and please do drop in a message in case you want to subscribe to the same. We'd love you to become a member of the society and join hands with us in our journey towards wellness. Today's session is the 7th of our 12-part series on wheat-related disorders and its many manifestations. For those of you who may have missed out on the earlier sessions, do visit our website and you can access the recordings of the previous episodes. With that, I'd like to thank everyone once again and hand over to Dr. Panda. Thank you.
Thank you, Anju, for this wonderful introduction. Hi, everyone. Very good evening from India. It's my pleasure to moderate this session today with one of the best people from the world to talk about nutrition and autism. And this is a topic which is not discussed in India too often. It's a privilege that today we have such a wonderful team of speakers here so that we can discuss it, so that we can learn, so that we can ask questions and take it forward from here in a big way. So to start with, why this topic of nutrition and autism? It's very important to understand that in India, autism was a number of autism. We can see, those who are in the fraternity as a parent, as a caregiver, as a professional, we know the number that is increasing, the number that we can see every single day. It's an explosion in the number of autism. And why it suddenly happened? It's a question to all of us. Some of us are saying that it's just that there are more reporting these days. But as professionals, who are working in this profession for a couple of almost a decades, we know that the exponential growth cannot be just reporting, cannot be just more reporting and more awareness and more sensitization. So what's the story behind it? That's what we are going to explore. Before we get into the discussion with our esteemed panelists here today, I would like to give you a brief on the data. What is the number of autism in India at this moment? I would like to give you a brief of data to start with. I request your permission to share my screen.
Ma'am, the permission is already there. You can just share your screen.
Thank you, Arjun. I hope my screen is visible. Yeah. So while talking about the number of autism, the census that we last had in 2011, the number that we had got in 2011 is still very incomprehensive. We do not have clarity about the severity of this epidemic. Yes, we can call it an epidemic by now, because there are different sources of data, but there are no government published data since 2016. 2011 was the census. It was due in 2021, but due to the pandemic, we couldn't have the census in India yet. But there are different studies going on across the country, and I have tried to gather some of those very important studies here today, where it says the first study, and you will see that the data is extremely contradictory at times, and there's a chance of underreporting at the same time. So one data from the Print, which is a famous news channel, news coverage here in India, based on April 2023 data, it says that every 1 in 100 children below 10 years, they have got autism in India. But if we go back, it says that India is a country with 1.3 billion people with children below 15 years of age, and 1/3 of the population has been estimated to have ASD in India, which amounts to 2 million. But on a data which is collected in 2022, it says that the 2 million number that was reported earlier, it is actually 18 million. So we can see the discrepancy in reporting. And we have questions about the methodology of the studies that were conducted for this kind of studies. So the number varies from somehow 1 in 100 to 1 in 166, and at times more than that. But if we can go to the next slide, we will see a study done by INCLAIM in 2018, which is considered to be an important study in India, that says that the ASD prevalence across 5 states in North and West India was as high as 125 children between 2 to 6 years of age group, and 1 in 80 among children in 6 to 10 years of age bracket. But the census says that about 2.21% of the population is suffering for autism. But surprisingly, when this census happened, autism was not considered as an independent, as an identical special needs in Indian disability law. So they actually haven't looked for autism. They have looked for intellectual disability. They have looked for mental illness. They have looked for visual impairment, hearing impairment, multiple disability. Autism was not a disability category in 2011. And the team of census, they were not experts on disability. They were briefed on disability. They were oriented on disability. While as professionals, we still find it difficult to diagnose autism or other kind of special needs. At times it's still confusing, but they were not experts who did this study, who did this census. And standing here, we remember the a prediction of the MIT scientist Stephanie Seneff, who said that in 2015, during a talk, she said that maybe by 2025, every second child is going to have ASD in this planet, which can be an exaggeration standing here today at 2023, but it's true that the number is enormous. It's scary. Every single day now, when we are at our clinic, we experience at least 5 to 6 new cases every single day, which is a huge number. And I'm sure all the panelists present here today, they have similar experience wherever they are, in whichever part of the globe. So starting from here, I would like to go straight to our discussion, and starting with Dr. Natasha Campbell. I would like to know, ma'am, what is your view? Why is this huge upsurge in the number of autism globally?
This epidemic of autism in India is just following the epidemic of autism globally. In the Anglo-Saxon countries, this epidemic was about 30 years ago. The numbers that you're getting now in India, we reached about 30, 25 years ago. And the numbers are still growing. And it's difficult to find even statistics now. 30 years ago, we were diagnosing 1 child in 10,000. That was the official statistic, though new numbers were coming. And majority of professionals never seen autism, never have seen an autistic individual, and didn't know about it much. Today, on the East Coast of America, the latest information that I have, we're diagnosing 1 child in 15 with autism. So India is just catching up with this sort of thing. So the cause of it is the Western lifestyle, the way people eat, and the way agriculture works in the West, the industrial agriculture. Industrial agriculture uses a plethora of chemicals, which in their nature are antibiotics. Everything you buy in the supermarket today, and obviously this has arrived to India, everything people eat now for breakfast, lunch, and dinner in India contains antibiotics, broad spectrum, powerful antibiotics. Why is that important? Because the human body is a microbial community. There are more microbes inside our bodies than there are human cells. And the majority of that microbial community lives in the digestive system. Every microbial community in nature only functions if it is harmonious, if it is balanced. Every microbe has to be present in that microbial community. Fungi, bacteria, viruses, protozoa, archaea, all kinds of creatures, because they all contribute their own functions and they all control each other. They don't allow each other to become pathogenic, to start causing trouble. And that way the harmonious microbial community works together, and it is our friend. We are made out of it to a large degree. A healthy person has a healthy, balanced, harmonious microbial community in their body. But when you're eating antibiotics for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and in between, these antibiotics are killing off part of that microbial community. No antibiotic in the world can kill every microbe. They only affect particular microbes which are sensitive to that particular antibiotic. And once those microbes are killed, the whole microbial community becomes unbalanced. The harmony is gone. The balance is gone. So various microbes become uncontrolled. They proliferate and grow very fast because microbes can produce trillions of babies per hour. They multiply very, very fast. And they become pathogenic. They start digesting food in their own way, converting it into millions of poisonous chemicals. At the same time, they damage the integrity of the gut wall, making it porous and leaky. Holes develop in the gut wall of the person, literally. And all these poisons absorb through those holes into the blood, into the lymph of the person, and then distributed around the body. Whichever organ this mixture of chemicals gets to, it causes disease. If it gets into the brain of a developing child, particularly a baby or a toddler, it will cause autism. ADHD, ADD, attention deficit disorder, dyslexia, dyspraxia, oppositional defiant disorder, any kind of developmental disorder on a mental level. If it gets into your lungs, you can get asthma. If it gets into your skin, you can get eczema. If it gets into your pancreas and damages the functions of the pancreas, you get diabetes type 1. Wherever this mixture of toxicity gets to, it causes disease. I've been working with this now more than 20 years with this situation. I call this situation in the human body GAPS, gut and psychology syndrome, and gut and physiology syndrome, which in the English language abbreviate to the same GAPS, GAPS. We have a person with abnormal gut flora. The gut wall is damaged, porous and leaky. The abnormal gut flora produces a river of toxins. These toxins absorb and poison the person. In my professional opinion, almost 100% of children who have been diagnosed with autism in the world today have been born with a perfectly normal brain. These were perfectly normal babies, but they got abnormal gut flora from their mother and father, because we have generations of people now who have been exposed to these agricultural chemicals and various other influences in the modern environment, which also damage our microbial community. And with every generation, that damage is getting deeper and worse. So the mother and the father had damaged gut flora themselves, and they passed it to their baby at the moment of birth, and the mother passes it during pregnancy as well. So children get their mother's and father's gut flora, which is already damaged. And then the mother's eating from the supermarket foods which are full of antibiotics, and these antibiotics are flowing in her milk, and lots of toxins come from her own gut flora, which is damaged, and the child is getting all of that. So these babies were born with a perfectly normal brain, and then they get poisoned. The river of toxicity coming from the digestive system of the child gets into the brain of the child and does not allow the brain to develop normally. And as a result, the child develops autism, or becomes hyperactive, or develops attention deficit disorder, or some other psychiatric or psychological problem, and also eczema, asthma, and other physical problems. This is GAPS. And for this situation, we have a GAPS nutritional protocol, which is described in my books with the same name, GAPS books, which is designed specifically to normalize the microbial community in the digestive tract and everywhere else in the human body, rebalance it, bring the harmony back. Once that happens, and we do that through food, through diet, GAPS diet is designed to do that, to restore the normal, balanced, harmonious microbial community in the body of the person. And once that happens, the gut wall heals and seals itself. All the holes in the gut wall get closed. So that river of toxicity stops. It stops being produced in the first place, and it stops. And once it stops coming to the brain and absorbing, the brain cleans itself up, because human body has a cleaner inside it. It cleans itself all the time, has a powerful ability to cleanse. And the brain cleans up. Once these toxins stop coming in, the brain cleans up. And the child starts waking up and coming out of autism, or coming out of another disability, and starts learning and starts developing normally. Obviously, the younger the child is when this happens, the better results we get. The longer the child was trapped in this toxic fog, being poisoned, basically, the more physical damage is inflicted upon the brain, and the more difficult that damage to undo. So in my clinical experience, up to the age of 4.5, maybe 5, we can reverse autism 100%. We can reverse autism fully. After that age, every child improves, and we cannot predict in advance to what degree the child will recover, but they all improve. I have adults with autism in my clinic who are in their 40s, 50s, even 60s. They all improve. Obviously, at that age, autism will not disappear. The person will remain autistic, but they will become physically well. The pain will go, the inflammation will go, and their brain cleanses, and you can teach them at that point some things that you think are important to teach that person. For example, some self-help skills. So that is what's happening with autism epidemic in India. And I'm happy to offer this protocol to the Indian people to save their children and to save other members of the family.
Thank you so much, Dr. TomO'Bryan. And if I'm understanding it correctly, you have mentioned about the gut and brain connection here, and about the leaky gut and the way the antibiotics are impacting the good bacteria inside the gut, and that way it's creating the symptoms in the physiological manifestations are coming up. And
Absolutely.
I'm sure we have participants from different community here. There are medical professionals, there are students, there are researchers, parents, caregivers, everybody. So we would definitely like to know more about leaky gut, but that we will do in a while. Before that, with your permission, I would like to move to Dr. Deepak Gupta. Sir, I would like to know, I'm sure that all the participants would like to know, what are the signs and symptoms as a doctor, as a psychiatrist, you deal with such clients every single day. So what are the signs and symptoms of autism that the parents, they might, focus on?
See, as we know that the epidemic is on the rise in India, there was a time when people used to identify children at the age of 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, and it is to be late identification. Now, with more awareness coming up, and with a lot of advocacy happening in some parts of the country, we can identify children as young as 9 to 12 months. So that's what I keep on saying to on every platform. Don't wait for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Don't wait for those DSM-4 diagnoses and ICD-11 diagnosis to happen, so that a psychologist or a rehabilitation expert or any other professional puts a, signature or a stamp on it. We can identify. Absolutely. Yes. We can identify them even at the age of 9 months when they have a poor eye contact or when they are not responding to their name. Correct? That's what. So 9 to 12 months is a time when you can start. You're seeing some of the kids even start having regression around 9 to 12 months also. I have seen that. Usually the regression starts after between 1 to 3 years, but yes. So 9 to 12 months is a time when the poor eye contact, poor name response is something which is there. Also, the pinpointing, the pinpointing usually should start by 12 to 16 months, but you pinpointing by 14 months, 16 months, they should start pinpointing at things. They should start having it, but if that is not developed by 16 to 18 months also should be a big concern. So these are the very, very early symptomatology. And that is around the time when parents, they see the child is lost in his own world. It's a little isolated. It's not interacting with other kids. 16 to 18 months or 18 to 20 months, that is the time they found the child is not interacting with the siblings or with other children at that point of time, and tend to be in his own world. So this is all are the early, very early, that poor eye contact, not respond, poor name response, lack of pinpointing, any regression should be a big red flag sign. Whether it's at 9 months, people saying 9 months, don't worry, the child will pick it up. No, child will not pick it up. Intervene. It's better to be false positive rather than false negative. You intervene, you put things into it. And then, as we know, the awareness is still increasing, as Dr. Natasha was talking about. Still, people are coming to know. There's a lot of still denial is there, lack of acceptance. In professionals also, they feel, and a lot of people, they say, no, don't worry, the child will start picking up. Now, another thing which starts coming up is between 1.5 to 2 years, the words should start coming up. The single words should start coming by 16 to 18 months, single words. And by 2 years, the 2 words phrases, They should start joining those, those two words, and that should happen. So if that is not happening, again, should be a concern. Now, a lot of times, it's good for them to go to the concerned medical person and check for it. If it's only other symptoms are not there, because a lot of times other symptoms may be there, that means the child is going towards a autism spectrum disorder things. And also another thing is that is the time the real regression starts coming up, around 1.5 to 2.5 years. Now that is also the same time when your restricted repeated behaviors like flapping, like flipping, like visual stimmings, obsessions, and playing with certain objects, spinning, lining up, all those things start gradually coming up around 1.5 to 2.5 years of age. That is the time. So gradually the parents can start picking it up, or professional can start picking it up. And then gradually the other symptomatology start. So the most important thing is that we need to pick it up early. Also, another thing we start coming is the sensory issues, understimulation and overstimulation. That is one thing, is that unusual response to the sound, smell, touch, light, all those things starts coming up, that is the thing, is that. So we can identify them. We don't have to wait for all the symptoms to come. And the child should be put, is a classical autism, no. And I've seen a lot of people, a lot of families coming to me, not only from India, even the Indian families coming from the other part of the world, when they come to meet their relatives and they have visited different parts, like wherever part of the world, they say, okay, wait and watch, we can't say. Let's just, okay. But my point is that it is not the issue of diagnosis. It's picking up early. It's picking up early and picking the right interventions, picking the right gut interventions, reducing the inflammations, working on the gut dysbiosis, right stimulation in the home environment. That is, and educating the parents. That is very, very important. As Dr. Natasha also said, if you start picking up early, you are able to bring the child out of it. We know, we have seen enough kids. I've seen enough kids coming out of it. Even in India, I do promote, I'm one of the few ones who promote of these diets and other intervention in the country, being a child psychiatrist, but then people who follow diligently, I've seen them, the kids come out by 2.5, 3.5, coming out very, very smoothly. That's what I'll say about the early symptomatology and picking up.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. And as we call it autism spectrum disorder, the symptoms that you have mentioned, some of the symptoms are present in some of the kids, and some of the symptoms may not be present in some of the kids. And as you say that it's whenever any of such symptoms are visible, it's better to go to a professional and ask for help. Instead of going for a labeling or a diagnosis per se, it's better to address the symptoms and see where it is leading to, and whatever available management is there, access it and make the most use of it at that moment.
Absolutely.
So going ahead from the symptoms that you have just mentioned, what's the connection, if you can elaborate on the connection of autism with ADHD or learning difficulties or ODD and such other symptoms?
See, all these are, as Dr. Natasha just mentioned, all these are neurodevelopmental disorders. So it all depends that how much the brain gets impacted, how much the brain is getting, how much the inflammation is happening, how much the toxins are reaching to the brain, how much it is impacting. So a lot of people believe that all of them are in the spectrum, though the classification system made them separately, like autism, ADHD, learning difficulties. They have, some people want to become sense SPD also separately, but still it is not separately. I believe that it is a whole gamut of autism spectrum disorder, which has its own. That is why a lot of people, including me, I believe it is not autism, it is autisms, AUTISMS, autisms. And I believe it has a lot of flavors and a lot of colors to it. It depends. So it is, and if you see the children who have ADHD, it is like they have different profile of hyperactivity. Some are restless, some are pacing up, some are wandering away, some have sensory overstimulation. That's why they become overstimulated and restless, and that's what is there. So so that's what is there. And as they grow up, because there's a lot of brain fogging is there, they're not able to address the academic challenges and academic issues. They start having learning difficulties. And that's where the new diagnosis starts coming up, the learning disability or learning difficulties, depending on the severity. The autisms, ADHD, learning difficulties, sensory profiling, which is coming up. Defines is what? If I don't listen to you, that's a defined. Correct. And to understand a child on the spectrum disorder, it's sometimes very challenging. Understanding what he's going through. It is not that his brain is not working. His brain is working in a different way, because it is modulated by a lot of other factors, including toxins, gut dysbiosis, inflammation, and heavy metals, which has caused inflammation and oxidative stress. So the brain is working in a different way. Understand the child's brain, and then work, which is also called in this language is meltdowns. So those meltdowns. So understand the child, understanding that brain language, and then modulating the child, creating the safe environment. The defiance goes away, the meltdowns goes away.
Right.
So it is that way, everything. And another thing is like Tourette's, tics, which is again part of it. Tics coming and going, motor tics, vocal tics, pandas, pens, all are interlinked to it. It is that whole puzzle. So you need to figure it out, rather than putting into those. I'm not a big I'm not a big person who believes in giving those labels. I'm to identify the person, individuality, and what is happening in the brain and the body, and to work this connection, and then try to work it into it. So that's where. So I believe this is all linked in. But otherwise, from a child psychiatrist perspective, if I change my hat and see from the DSM-5 and ICD-11 and other studies, yes, around 30 to 70% of kids with autism has a comorbidity. Right. And this comorbidity is called as ADHD, learning disability, ODD, Tourette's, DMDD, also, and motor coordination disorders, and social communication disorders, language disorders, learning disabilities. So all these are the comorbidities which is talked about and some of them develop depression, mood disorders, anxiety disorders, which is more common in what is called high functioning kids, especially Asperger's, a different profile. They're not able to relate their social perspective as they're growing up. So this is what is the whole spectrum.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gupta. Thank you.
May I add one more comorbidity, and that is epilepsy.
Yes,
very true.
A big comorbidity is epilepsy.
Absolutely. And
I have thousands of children around the world who have recovered from epilepsy, all sorts of forms of epilepsy, through correcting their gut flora, through healing their digestive system.
And one thing I want to say at this point of time, sorry, I'm taking a little 30 seconds more, that a lot of times epilepsy is not identified. I think Dr. Natasha will agree with me. A lot of time it is not diagnosed because it is thought that it is autism means if the child is doing all this is part of sensory issues or repetitive behaviors, or it is getting lost. But ideally, the child is having epileptic phenomena for few seconds, and that is missed. It could be different. It could be absent seizures. It could be frontal. It could be complex partial, petit. It could be different types of epileptic phenomena, and they keep on changing a lot of times. So identifying them, picking up, and working on it is also an important perspective. That also adds to the comorbidity or the spectrum.
Which gets diagnosed might be at a later age when they grow in a big way, right? Thank you so much, Dr. Gupta. Thank you. So we will move to Dr. Tom O'Bryan, please. Sir, the next thing, Dr. Natasha Campbell already focused on this, but it's a question, it's a question to everyone that what causes autism? We have focused on leaky gut. We know that the entire world is researching on this. There are breakthrough researches, there are confusion. So we would like to hear from you that what is causing this, this epidemic? what is the cause of autism.
Yes, thank you. First, I am so thrilled to welcome my dear friend, Dr. Natasha Campbell-McBride here. We've known each other for many years, and she is the courageous pioneer on the forefront. She's been called a nutcase for over 20 years for standing her ground on this principle. Now, the science has caught up, and she's absolutely right in what she's saying. If I exercise my arm and the next day my arm is sore, I know it's because there's too much lactic acid produced by the muscle cells because I exercise too much and my arm's going to be sore for a couple days. That exhaust from a muscle cell is the exhaust that's produced by the bacteria in the gut. Every bacteria in the gut has exhaust. We call it metabolites, but it's just the exhaust. And 36% of all the small molecules in the healthy blood, 36%, that's over 1/3 of everything in your bloodstream, are the metabolites of the microbiome in the gut. They're the messengers that go throughout the body, carried by the bloodstream to tell the brain what to do. It was Professor Michael Gershon at Princeton. In 1999, he wrote the book, The Second Brain. And he told us 20 years ago, for every one message from the brain going down telling the gut what to do, there are 9 messages from the gut going up telling the brain what to do. The ratio's 9-to-1. And the primary mechanism for that communication is the metabolites, the exhaust of the bacteria in the gut. So as Dr. Campbell-McBride tells us, if you've got too many bad guys in the gut and not enough good guys, the messengers that the bad guys are producing are inflammatory messages, and they travel through the body. And the system that has the greatest impact, in my opinion, is the brain. It's a 9-to-1 ratio. So the brain is getting directions from the gut what to do. The worse your gut is, the worse your brain is likely to function because it's getting the wrong messages. It's getting messages of inflammation and poor development. And what Dr. Campbell-McBride did in 18 minutes here today is a PhD program that all of our practitioners need to learn. And she did a beautiful job of summarizing it very, very quickly. The primary cause, in my opinion, of the dramatic increases that Dr. Gupta started off telling us the studies on in India, the primary trigger of this is generation after generation, more toxins we're being exposed to, more bad chemicals, more heavy metals in the water, in the food. And mom's generation had more chemicals in her than her mother did when her mother was pregnant with her. Mom had more chemicals accumulate in the body. Every time you put nail polish on, the phthalates are in your bloodstream in 4 to 5 minutes. Now that's what makes the nail polish hard, are the phthalates, the chemicals used to mold plastic. This is just an example. You can't store food in plastic containers. You can't put nail polish on this full of phthalates. You have to get organic nail polish. Then you're okay. You have to get glass containers so that you're not poisoning your family in these minute dosages that accumulate over the years and accumulate. There's a world that you have to learn about, an entire world. You're not going to get it in 1 hour here. But if you can get the concept that, wait a minute, 1/3 of everything in the bloodstream are messages from the bacteria in the gut that are telling the entire body, what the brain, how many hormones to make called neurotransmitters, the heart, how to work, the liver, how to detox, break down chemicals. All of this is getting messages from the bacteria in the gut. Yes. And we have to wake up to this. We have to understand the gut is the home of where your health comes from and where your disease comes from. That's the bottom line. And as Dr. Gupta said, Dr. Deepak Gupta said, you've got to look early for these symptoms. My son, unfortunately, had a very traumatic birth. We planned for a beautiful home birth and it was going to be wonderful, but there was a crisis. And so we had to have an emergency C-section. He wasn't breathing when he was born. It was very stressful time. So I've been watching him. He's just over 2 years old now. I've been watching every day, every move he makes, because I know what to look for. And when my son would just stare off into the wilderness, just like he's looking at something, I would take my head and go down by him, and I would look in the direction he'd look. And then he would just get this little smile on his face, and then he'd come back. So he was daydreaming. That's normal. But you look for these kinds of things. You have to learn what to look for so that you can intervene early. This is a wonderful, wonderful conversation. But the message I hope that I can give to everyone here is you aren't going to learn this in 1 hour. You need to read my books. You need to read Dr. Campbell McBride's books on what are the clues to look for. How do you identify where the fuel, the petrol, is causing the inflammation in the body? And it all starts in the gut. That's the primary message that I could bring here today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tom. And I'm sure the participants would like to know, is there a way that we can identify this from when the kid is born, for the mother or the kid? Is there any medical test or any other test available where we can predict this after the child is born or before the child is born?
In Sweden, they have socialized medicine. They have records on everybody. And they looked at over 300,000 people to see, and these were people who were referred to gastroenterologists because they had some type of a gut problem. And they looked to see how many of these people that had a gut problem actually developed autism. And they found that there was a 309% increased risk of autism in 300,000 people who were sent to gastroenterologists if they had elevated antibodies to wheat. So sometimes wheat can be one of the inflammatory triggers that causes the problem. Sometimes soy can be an inflammatory trigger. Sometimes dairy, sometimes potatoes. Who knows? Who knows what the triggers are? The message is you just have to look. You have to comprehensively look and see what are the triggers of inflammation for this person.
Right. And we can do that through a test?
Yes, there are blood tests. And I think Dr. Gupta can talk to us more about what's available in India.
Yeah. Dr. Gupta, would you like to say?
We have, at this point of time, as more and more awareness coming and a lot of labs are supporting us. So we have various tests are there available, as Dr. Tom said, but the best is to keep a diary and to look for a diary and see what is causing. But yes, we have food intolerance test, which looks for IgG. We have food allergy test, which we have IgE. And we have comprehensive stool analysis test where we can look for the gut, and we can look for the inflammation, and we can look for the short chain fatty acids. And they're a little expensive from an Indian perspective, but yes, we can look for it. We can look for a levels of lactoferrin for any other inflammation signs are there. And we can check for the pH of the gut. We can check for the various pathogenic organisms, including parasites, Clostridium, yeast, and various other pathogenic commensals in the gut. So we have that, but yes, they are expensive tests. So we also have other various tests where we can check the blood test and the hair test analysis, where we can check for the heavy metals and the various deficiencies. We can check. All depends. Everything has a cost. So we need, and we are in India, and if we have the population with so much of variation of this 1.4 billion population we have, and so we need to look at the pocket of the parents. And I definitely don't want to put a load on the parents' pocket. So a lot of times I do tell them that if we can do as per your budgeting. So, but yes, tests are there, and the tests now can be sent to even US also. We have certain labs and certain people are there who can get it and send this. We can check for pandas. We can do ASO anti-DNSB titers. We can do other. We can do stool for the yeast fungal infections. We can check for the Clostridium difficile separate also. We can do that, and we can do the, as I told about the various deficiencies. So we have enough profiles which we can do it, and we can do for the methylation profile also now. We have depending on again, we can check for various methylation SNPs. We can check for them as per it. So there's a whole gamut of testing which is now available to us. When I started 2 decades back, we had a struggle. And gradually with collaborations and with partnerships and with working with them, with parent support and with professional support, we are able to get some of this test to other country.
I will take just 15 seconds more with you, Dr. Gupta. I understand the tests are available, but before going for pregnancy, is it still a practice to go for this test? I understand that these tests are expensive, but even with the richer section of the country,
very good point. I do tell you, a lot of people ask me, and what do I tell them? I tell them very clearly, work on your health. Improve your gut, cut down your toxins, cut down your EMRs, and this electromagnetic rates, sleep on time, have a healthy lifestyle, dry clean your kitchen, remove plastics, remove aluminiums, remove microwaves from your kitchen, go to what your grandmothers used to do in 70s and 60s, if it's possible. Try to get glassware, ceramics, earthenware in your kitchen. Correct. So I tell them that dry clean your kitchen. I tell them dry clean your health, gut health. Make sure your stomach is fine. You're having a proper poo yourself.
Right.
Otherwise, do the test.
Yeah.
Make sure you're not. Yeah. So all those things I do tell them. And some of them ask me, do I get genetic testing also? I don't stop them. I told them, if your pocket allows, go for the genetic testing, meet a genetic expert. But still after genetic, you can't get 100% answer. No genetist can tell you that 100% your child will be safe after doing whole exome analysis or chromosomal microarray, karyotypings, and other things. Nothing is 100%. But what is 100%? What is helpful, I can tell you from my 15 years of preventive practices with working with so many mothers, is work on your gut health before you conceive. That's very, very important.
Maintaining the basics.
Also on the stress levels. Also on the stress levels. I tell you, happy mother gives birth to happy children. That's very, very important. So that is also I tell them, because if the stress is there, we know the inflammation will be there. We know the bad interleukins will keep on coming up. So we need to take care of the inflammation, interleukins. We don't want the gut to become leaky and sensitive and fragile, because everything enters through them and will reach which part of the brain, we don't know, but yes, mostly to the brain. That's where the numbers are increasing. That's where we need to look into it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gupta. Thanks a lot. We will move to Ishi Khosla, ma'am. Ishi, my question to you would be, what is the correlation between this wheat and dairy products? And why is GFCF diet so controversial? I would like you to talk about it.
Thank you, Dr. Amrita. So much has been already discussed about the importance of the microbiome, the leaky gut, and the inflammation which follows this disturbance of the gut microbiome. One of the key components or one of the key triggers for dysbiosis has been found to be the food that we eat. And among the elements in food, in what we see practically, as well as there is some kind of research to support this, that wheat protein has gluten, and that triggers the dysbiosis and also the process of increasing impermeability in the gut, which is what we're talking about, the leaky gut. So wheat protein has been implicated in this process. So certainly there is merit in looking at it. And there are other aspects of wheat, which maybe will take up too much time to discuss in detail, but whether it's a gluten or there is a protein called the gluteomorphine, which triggers opioid effects and maybe changes in the brain function, or whether it's a glyphosate or other parts of wheat. We don't know exactly what it is, but there is a connection. And Dr. Natasha has been talking about the glyphosate connection. And here I may take this opportunity to just mention that, yes, in India, in the 1960s, because we are all baffled, what's going on? We are getting smarter about our food. We are getting much more informed about nutrition, but what's going on in the last 20 years? So one of the big changes in India was the introduction of modern wheat, which was a high-yielding variety of wheat, as against the traditional forms of wheat, which was obviously a different sort of plant, in the sense that they were chromosomal changes, and wheat, we know, in itself can trigger, it has an immunogenic potential. And modern wheat has been also, this is pure research, that it has not only higher gluten, but also higher inflammatory gluten fractions, which have been expressing more compared to the traditional wheat. So we have a higher expression of the immunogenic proteins in modern wheat, simply put, which means that there is some correlation. And we are seeing an epidemic in the say after 20 years, whether it's heart disease, obesity, diabetes, cancer, autoimmunity, mental health, everything is going out of the window. And so there perhaps is something, and this wheat was not only high yielding, but was also crop bred to be pesticide resistant, glyphosate resistant, which meant that when you apply the pesticide or the fungicide, it will not damage the plant, but it will. So indiscriminate use of these fungicides has happened, and we are, I think, facing a lot of burden of diseases thanks to that. So there is no one factor with wheat, but there may be multiple. And with dairy also, there has been application of antibiotics, hormones, and lots of growth promoting, substances and chemicals, which we don't really have a control of. So maybe it's like Dr. Natasha said, we are getting antibiotics on a daily basis in 3 meals. So we are all having our milk and curd and cheese, etc., which could be triggering the leaky gut. And in itself, it also has a protein called casein. And casein also is a larger molecule to digest. So if you have a leaky gut and the gut has not, there is insufficient time for the breakdown of these molecules, it can go down into the bloodstream partially broken, and that can also cause a cascade of reactions and trigger the inflammation in parts of the body. So yes, these are issues, and and in clinical practice, in some patients, we do see elimination of these does help. But having said that, why is the diet controversial? Could be multiple reasons. We don't have enough good trials and research to support these. Some have positive, some are conflicting, some are very supportive. And in my practice also, I see that, in some patients it really works. But I think, therefore, one factor is not enough to control everything. There will be multiple factors we need to, use and to apply. And in the diet, there are other, there are vitamins, there are good fats, which Dr. Natasha's diet also supports, a good fat diet, and to make the gut strong. So it's not just one thing. So the child may be on a gluten-free diet and a casein-free diet, but maybe taking things which are still causing the leakiness in the gut. Could be corn, could be soy, could be cross-contamination, cross-reactions, as we say. So, the grains in my practice, which I find very, very, people react adversely but besides the corn and the soy, are oats and amaranth, which are very healthy grains, and people do substitute these as alternative grains, and there is a problem. And also, sometimes because the body can process up to 20 parts per million as, gluten content, which is there in the food. So a lot of times people are using alternative flours, which are ground in contaminated flour mills. So that could also be causing conflicting and contradictory reactions. So it's just not one thing, but I think the important message here is not just a GFCA diet. It is important, but that's not the only thing. We need to build up the gut. We need to make the gut lining stronger by using many other modalities. And that combination will certainly be useful.
Right. And the ingredients that you are mentioning, Ishi, in a country like India, where the majority of the population is on wheat, and there's a majority population who are vegetarian. So eliminating wheat, milk products, soy products, oats, and everything, it can be quite difficult for a family to maintain their regular eating habits.
Very true. And having said that, these kids, and Dr. Natasha would agree with me, and Dr. Deepak also, who sees a lot of patients, these kids have a lot of feeding problems. They can be very fussy. They can be very selective. They don't eat anything and everything. So they have very limited diets, and that also puts them at risk for developing nutritional deficiencies, one. And B, they also have digestive issues very often. They have constipation. They're known to have IBS symptoms, reflux, bloating, etc. So, we need to be very mindful about how to deal with it. But yes, in India, we do have a parallel grain, which is rice. And rice-based products and rice preparations are pretty easy. But again, too much of carbohydrate and starches can be counterproductive. So it's not so simple, yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Ishi. We will move to Christiana. And I would really like to understand, while we were talking about this whole session, you mentioned that when there are various types of autism, as it's a spectrum of disorder. So there are some general principles to look at it, and there are some specific ways to address it. So what are the ways you suggest to the parents, the caregivers, to deal with it? And of course, you are working with the camel milk part. We will come to that part later on.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you. Namaste, everyone in India. So I have been fortunate to work with many of people in India for many years now, due to my camel work and my autism work, which cross over due to the use of camel milk for many health conditions. So my first book was about recovering my son. So he was almost 3 years old when he was diagnosed. At that time, I didn't know anything about these kind of things. So one of the first things I did was remove dairy, remove gluten, and all these different things. And then over the time, I started to realize, okay, this isn't bothering him, but this is bothering him. So it's sort of what parents do. They have to triage, they have to observe, and then they have to triage what are the most important things to do for their child, both in diet, which is what we're focusing on here today, but then also you have to do that with behavioral issues, schooling, other therapies that are generally required for people with autism. So that said, it became apparent to me over the years, and now there's some science information on that, which I will touch on briefly, that there are commonalities with people with autism, children and adults. Those are generally language, even if it's highly capable language. College professors, sometimes a conversational level is not so great. Or there can be all the way down to people who have no verbal language. So, but there are also many different subtypes. So I could see that years ago. There are children who basically don't have much language, have very impaired gastrointestinal systems, have extreme behaviors. And then there are those that have a varying, expressions of these kind of impairments. So for parents, one of the most useful things to do is to find those children who are like your children, discuss with other parents that what their children are like, what their symptoms are like, and then that can help you find sort of your goal, your people that can mentor you and see what has worked for their child if your child is like that. Now, that's just the simple way that you do it on a day-to-day basis. So Now I'm going to back up. So scientifically, we now know that there are autisms. There are at least 6 subtypes of autism, but we know that there are more of those. So basically, we know that these manifestations scientifically, as shown in a study and an ongoing study by the Mind Institute in California, that the subtypes can be determined either medically or behaviorally or with other things like that. So there are subtypes that you can look at. How do they respond to sound? How do they how their excess cerebrospinal fluid, which most people cannot look at that. How they are riddled with anxiety. And then also, of course, their gut comorbidities. So we're aware now that there are these subtypes and there are ways of figuring those out, but we're not there yet. So yes, we have testing that we can do. I've always done a lot of testing on my son. They could measure actually if we used antivirals or if manipulate his diet, how his white blood cell count was responding and how his information was lowering or going up. So there are testings. These things do require the use of a doctor that is familiar with autism spectrum disorder and diet and medications and things like that. These are hard to find even in America, but in India, they're very difficult to find. So we're very lucky to have our colleagues with us today on the ground in India that are aware of these. So that said, this is a very complex issue, as we all know. So I'll start with the fact that what we just touched on, you can set yourself up to have a better pregnancy, and the father also needs to set himself up to live the cleanest lifestyle that they can. It's very difficult, but it can be done. I feel India has an advantage in one way in this because you have like millets, which people in Western Rajasthan say use millets, not wheat. It's more healthy for you. And so there is a movement toward using millets for health. Also, you can adapt the very cow milk heavy diet. Sometimes in India, you can adapt that to make it dairy free with olive oil. You can use camel milk, which you can get in India easily now. Easily. It's not the easiest thing, but sometimes it is. So I'll talk about that later. But so we do know that processed foods raise the risk of neurodevelopmental disorders in children. In my book, Camel Crazy, I refer to that research. And so it's very important to know also that in India, there is a large use of pesticides. I did give a lecture at Rajrishi College in Alwar, Rajasthan, a few months ago, and one of my hosts is Dr. Mamta Sharma. And so she has a specialty in pesticides in India. And so she is aware of the developmental disorders, and we did discuss about that. So this is an issue everywhere, but this is something that people have to try to find out about. It's very difficult. So, pesticides are in the water, the air. Also, the rate of autism is correlated with things like proximity to power lines, proximity to air pollution, closeness to crowded streets with pollution. As we know, India in some places is a densely populated country. So, this is a hard thing. So try to get your air filters going. As you know, of course, the air pollution situation, particulate matter in Delhi, and some of the other places is very critical in India. And people have to take extreme measures already in the winter, as you know. So getting those air filters going in the house, wearing a good quality mask when you have to commute and leaving your home, these things could help if it's important if you're going to have a pregnancy. Okay, so then to talk about what parents can do. So going to support group meetings, be they online or in person, is really important because nobody else knows what's going on and who to go to, like the veteran parents that are in there and have these children with autism and that they're really dealing with it. It's a huge burden on the parent. I have lived it. It's really difficult to survive when you have a child that's up all night, hitting the walls. Maybe you have other children. It's just a disaster. And so a lot of times you have to drop out of the workforce. It puts a major burden on the mother. And then, you lose her earnings. So anything to help this situation is really critical. So I would say somehow getting the parents to realize there is an amount of shame attached to this, as we know, in all countries, but getting the parents to come out of their kind of fear and don't tell anybody there's something up with our child, and connecting with others who can guide them is really crucial. And there's a great school in Jaipur called Disha, and they have a lot of children with disabilities. When I went there at the end of 2017, they did not have that many patients with autism or students with autism. So it would be interesting to go back now and see how many they do have, because the techniques they were using for educational matters were really helping those children. And I felt they were very appropriate for autism. But then taking organizations like you have here, our colleagues here today, and schools like Disha, and helping get that word out, a network to make support groups. And if people want to somehow, volunteer, start chapters, these are very important. So I guess that's the main thing I would say. There are a lot of interventions that one can do with autism. Certainly, we've heard Dr. McBride talk about her work. I've heard about her work many, many years ago. And we've heard there are many things you can do. I mean, there's so many therapies we're not going to touch on today. I say diet is your number one easiest access thing to do. It does not harm by removing cow milk, dairy, and this is one thing you can easily do. You can see if your child is reacting to the casein and the other things in the cow milk brands that are perhaps not good for them. Now in India, you have the heritage breed, which is A1 type of milk versus A2, which is more common in your American and commercial breeds. So if you want to kind of step down and try A1 milk, you can see if it's better for your child. However, I always say move away from the dairy first, and then there's sugars, there's other things. We'll talk about that when you talk about the camel milk. But basically reach out. Autism community is global now, and we have the amazing Celiac Society of India here today. As we know, celiac disease does predispose one to different comorbidities, some of which involve psychological and mental conditions. So it's a natural marriage, and I'm really glad we're doing this today.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
Thank you so much, Christina. Thank you for sharing your thoughts here about the parents, about their struggle. And it's indeed a remarkable struggle for each of the parents there. And hats off to each of the parents. We move to Dr. McBride once again. Dr. McBride, I understand that even a day with you, Dr. Tom, Dr. Gupta, Ishi Khosla, Christina is going to be less, but I would like to take this small opportunity to ask you the impact of the usage of probiotics. How does it impact gut? How is it helpful in case of when we talk about autism?
Probiotics are very helpful, very helpful. And the first probiotics that I recommend to every family, fermented foods. Start fermenting. The recipes are in my books. There are lots of recipes online. There are various varieties of fermentation. And in India, you have your own recipes. You have a lot of fermented vegetables and fermented herbal things and spicy things that you do. So for example, with dairy, we ferment them. We never drink milk as it is. We ferment in the GAPS nutritional protocol because fermentation predigests food. And tea is steaming with beneficial microbes. You're eating lots and lots of good microbes with fermented foods. And you're eating a highly nutritious food because the microbes during the process of fermentation digested the vegetable, digested milk, or whatever else you're fermenting, and released all the nutrients into the mixture. So they're easy for us to absorb. We don't need to digest them anymore. So fermenting a lot of food is very, very helpful. And that it's cheap. It's inexpensive. Everybody can do that in India. Probiotics in capsules or other supplements and other forms are expensive. They may be available to some people, but to majority of people, I would imagine that would be too much. They can be also very helpful.
But people do throw away fermented foods.
Fermented foods, whether you have money for commercial probiotics or not, you do both.
Right.
And you can do the protocol just with fermentation if you do enough fermented foods at home.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. McBride. Yes, Dr. Tom, you want to add something?
I do. I want to reinforce that. Someone had typed a question in, I'm pregnant, what can I do? And I've tried to write in there, begin eating fermented foods every day, but it would not post in the answer. I think it's the number one food that we all need to be eating more of is fermented foods. Now, when you eat fermented foods, they're vegetables, or as Dr. McBride said, the dairy, but for foods, they're vegetables. Why is that? Because the good bacteria feed on the fiber in the vegetables. And as they feed on the fiber, they reproduce. So you get more of the good bacteria. So when you eat the fermented foods, you are inoculating your gut with the good bacteria. So the messages of the good bacteria, the exhaust, are going out into your bloodstream. They're happier messages. The more fermented foods you eat, within reason, of course. I tell patients 1 tablespoon a day. Dr. McBride may have a different recommendation, which is great, but at least 1 tablespoon a day, every day. And you eat different fermented vegetables because each family of fermented vegetables produces different good bacteria. So you want to alternate it regularly, but every day you're eating fermented vegetables.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Tom. And Dr. McBride, yeah.
I just want to add here, since we're talking fermentation, in India, Amrita, Dr. Deepak would know this, that in the South, they eat fermented food as a part of their staples. Their idli, dosa are a part of their meals and snacks on a daily basis, which are cereals and pulses combination. So, so going back to the traditional foods and understanding them better is really a joy.
Right. Thank you, Ishi. So I would like to go back to Dr. Campbell. Would you like to talk about the dairy products a little bit more?
Dairy products, yes. In every corner of the world, people have different animals that they milk. In some places, in most places, people milk cows and goats. Some people milk deer, some people milk camels, other animals, sheep can be milked. So in India, as I understand, you've got cows and you've got goats. The important thing is that the cow and the goat you're milking should be natural, real animal, not a hybrid created in some laboratory, not commercial breeds. Second, you want them to eat food that Mother Nature created them to eat: grass, bushes, vegetation, trees, leaves, branches. So the cow needs to be grazing in natural environment, not somewhere eating rubbish, not in the middle of the road. Sometimes you see it in India, or some other industrially polluted places where the cows are chewing, I don't know what. So they need to be on pasture in good places. The milk, they need to be milked clean. So the udder needs to be washed. Everything needs to be done clean so that you don't contaminate the milk after it's left the cow. And then we do not pasteurize it, because milk of any animal is alive. It's the white blood of that animal, with red blood cells removed and other elements removed. So it has alive immune cells, white blood cells, alive and active hormones, neurotransmitters, alive microbes, because blood has got its own microbiome. It's got its own microbial community. That is what's coming out of from the milking gland of the female, whether it's a human being or a cow or a goat or any other animal. If you pasteurize it, you kill it. You're introducing into the body something that is dead, and the body struggles to process it, to digest it, and to benefit from it. So that's the quality of milk we want. And then that raw milk you ferment 24 hours. You can use any traditional way of fermenting in India. In India, it's very warm. You can just leave a glass jar outside in the sun, it'll ferment. If it's a natural milk from a natural animal, you don't need to add anything. Here in the West, we use kefir grains, which is very powerful, very nutritious, and very healing for the human body. You can use yogurt cultures. And in communities like in India, I'm sure, people who ferment, they can share their little culture with their neighbors and family. You just take a little bit of your old kefir or yogurt, put it into fresh milk, and in 24 hours, it'll ferment. So that's the only form we have it in. If you have a sensitive child or a sensitive adult, then you drip the milk through a cheesecloth. The cheese will be sitting in that cloth. What drips out, yellow liquid, is whey. Whey is casein-free. And whey has low levels of various many substances which some people react to. So with a sensitive person, you might want to start with whey initially, just drinking whey. And with a small child, start with 1 teaspoon a day, see what happens. Does the child get eczema? Does the child cry more, or maybe diarrhea, or maybe constipation, or maybe vomiting, or any other symptoms? Nothing's happening, quickly increase. Quite quickly increase to having a bottle a day or 2 bottles a day of whey. And then once the whey is well tolerated, the microbial community in the whey will start changing the microbial community in the gut of the child, in the digestive system of the child. So in a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, you will be dealing with a very different microbial community. And at that stage, you may stop dripping. You can just give the kefir to the child as it is, yogurt as a child. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Yeah. So
I might want to say something about milk if it doesn't, just to add on to what she's saying, because I have a crossover into the veterinary world because of my work with livestock animals and things like that. So it is very important that the health of the animal is monitored. And of course, in many ancestral villages and things like that, they have their system. It's working for them. That's fine. I don't like to interfere with that. Nonetheless, for vulnerable populations and anyone, there are certain diseases we need to look after in our livestock, especially if we're going to consume raw milk, which I think raw milk is fantastic. We just have to be careful about it. So brucellosis tests can be done. Tuberculosis tests can be done on the animals. Additionally, like India just had an outbreak of lumpy skin disease in the cows when I was there in August. And those can be treated. The animal can be treated. However, it's not really a good idea to drink it during that thing, if it has any skin disorders like that. So just quickly to say, you have to know the source of your raw milk. You have to be very cautious about that. And generally, it's going to be safe, but it's a thing you have to be aware of for your children. And there are methods of wiping the teats appropriately. Really, the problem is sometimes the cold chain. There is not a cold chain for some of these villages where they have the raw milk. So you have to make sure that it is cold, brought in a safe manner from point A to point B. And sometimes in India, that's not so easy. So I believe in that raw milk being the best, but there is a flash pasteurization method that is much, it's not like VAT where you cook the milk for 30 minutes, which is the commercial method. So you can flash pasteurize it at home. In my book, Camel Crazy, I do have a method in the back that teaches you how to home flash pasteurize your milk. So that's just a safety backup that you can get. And always ask your merchant about, what they're doing. And sometimes you can ask them for the test results of their milk and their livestock before you consume that milk.
yeah. Thank you, Christina. I was just coming back to you after Dr. McBride regarding the camel milk. As you mentioned that camel milk is available in India, but it's extremely expensive and it's rare too. Availability is not that good at the same time. So, what is your experience? You have also worked in India. And how do you see Indians to use camel milk in near future? Will there be availability? Will there be, the prices will be less? What is it?
Okay, great. So there is availability now in India, so that's great. We'll talk about the merchants real quickly. So first of all, you have Camel Charisma, which is located out in Sadri in Pali district, in a part of Rajasthan. And they do ship milk to various places, and they have liquid milk. They also are selling cheese now and some things like that. So contact Hanwant Singh or Dr. Ilsa Kolar-Rolifson, and you can look online for Camel Charisma, and they can help get it to you. There's also Advic Foods, which advicfoods.com has their website, and they have powder, but then in the Delhi area, they have liquid. And then one nice thing about Advocate is they have chocolate. And so, you know, with our children on these restricted diets, it can become miserable to go to a party, to grab things out of their hands, just a miserable experience. So I love that they have chocolate. I verified it has no cow milk in it. They've told me. So I say, keep some of those chocolates on hand for your children to have as a treat. And then also you can get flavored milks from Advocate as well, which are also fun, and offer your child something. So as far as the global issue of camel milk, it was something that was known by pastoralists for thousands of years, and it's been used to treat sick people and traditionally given away for free to help the sick in Middle Eastern cultures, Indian cultures, a lot of places. But that knowledge was lost. So even the great camel cultures of the world had lost a lot of that knowledge. And then when I had the idea that the camel milk might help my son's autism symptoms, I had to fly it in from Bedouins in the Palestine area. And that was raw milk from the desert. And it was incredibly powerful milk. And they do graze on, you know, the desert herbs and all these amazing plants that may contribute to the medicinal aspect of the milk. However, the great thing about camel milk is even if they're not grazing in the desert on the herbs, the milk is still absolutely wonderful. So my son was the first patient to ever have milk from, you know, a desert animal in another country. And then I discovered a few years later, the Amish men in America had started milking camels. He got camel milk from them, which was on a farm eating grass in America, and the milk still worked. So yes, the best milk is from the desert when they graze on these herbs and everything, no question, but the milk still works wherever it's from. So that said, the milk is expensive. It is a thing that it's hard to control because they only have one baby every 13 months. It's not like a huge livestock animal, but the milk is becoming to be, you know, seen as a more commercially viable product. And you can get it in India. Gujarat, I just did a lecture for them. The Maldhari people are looking to put their milk out to help save the pastoralist people. And then Amul Dairy, of course, everybody knows Amul Dairy, huge brand globally in India. They do help support the farmers and sell camel milk. So you can find it. And as far as the cost, everything in autism costs so much and takes so much time and is so miserable to have to deal with. So to me, camel milk is a very simple, easy thing. You get it, you give it, you see if it works. Now, in the back of my book, Camel Crazy, I have a protocol on how you should do this. So I definitely recommend removing all other dairy first for a certain period of time. Then you can prepare the milk in certain ways to give it to these children. Many are very fussy, and you never tell them it's camel milk. So you don't want to give them any excuse to reject it, but there are ways to give it. I have a smoothie recipe in the book, and it's questions like, how long do I take it? Do I have to take it forever? How much do I give? Also for diabetes type 1 and 2, gut disorders, skin conditions, juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. I have these kind of suggested servings amounts in the back of the book. These are based on research and anecdote. So camel milk is an easy thing. You can get it, you can try it. Even if it doesn't have that rebound of amazing effect that it does in many of the children, it's nonetheless incredibly nutritious substance. It has antiviral, antibacterial, antifungal, in my opinion. A lot of these children have yeast overgrowth, which can make them wacky and weird and causes a lot of problems. And so it has GABA. It also has essential fatty acids and has pre and probiotics. So I like to just say it doesn't hurt to try it and give it. And second of all, you can't tell who's going to benefit. Now, I can, with these subtypes of autism, you can see many of these kids have circles under their eyes. They have bumps under their skin. They have either constipation or loose bowels. And then there's bumps sometimes under the back of their arms. These kind of things are tells that they're having immune system response to bad diet and other things like that. So these kids are a no-brainer. You take away the regular dairy, you give them camel milk and see what happens. Then sometimes they can tolerate more regular milk later if they've been on camel milk for a sustained period of time. But there are children that I have seen that I had no idea they would respond to camel milk, and they did beyond my wildest expectations. There's also like a 19-year-old. He had never had a formed bowel movement in his life. So think about that. You're changing diapers on a 19-year-old man. This kid got camel milk and he had this first formed stool in his life. Now, this child need to have it in glass bottles, which is expensive. But again, they're doing that thing where they get rid of all the potential toxin exposures. So at any rate, we could talk about that for a while, but we were limited on time. But India is a wonderful camel country. You have a great natural resource. The camels are threatened. It's the state symbol of Rajasthan, but they're going down in population. And one of the only ways we can save the camel in India is to have the milk come out, and that will help the economy. It helps benefit women and girl children as well, because the milk money often goes to them. So anyway, you can learn more about all that. Camel Crazy is my book. It's online about that. And it's got 4 chapters set in the beautiful country of India.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you. That was wonderful. So before we move to the question and answer session, I would like to understand from Ishi ma'am that in India, we are discussing about nutrition, we are discussing about a certain kind of gut health. But if a parent with a child in the spectrum, they need suggestion with the diet, where they are supposed to connect. And considering the fact that India, I mean, the prevalence of autism spectrum is more in the rural sector of the country. Their socioeconomic status is not that great. So considering everything, and I'm also asking this to you as a founder of Celiac Society, that what is there that we can offer to the general people of India, where a mother or a father, they are absolutely confused. And as this connection of gut and brain is still not accepted in all the medical fraternity, and people are actually not practicing this, taking care of gut health, and they get very confused. So the parents, as I directly work with parents over 17 years, I know how confusing it gets for them. So where they can reach out.
So, Amrita, that's a very difficult question, but also a very important question. I think the answer is simply awareness, awareness, awareness. We can't fall shy from doing that. Whatever we are doing is to create awareness among the general population, but more importantly, among the treating physicians, because whenever the child is going to a physician, whether it's a pediatrician or a psychiatrist or a developmental expert or somebody like you, everybody must have awareness about the connection between diet and their child's condition, and must refer them to qualified people for the same. And here I can just say that we at the Celiac Society are doing these, consultations. We have a community. We direct them to the right resources and for support groups and help. We do that, and that's done free of charge. But it's a very, very, very fractional community. I mean, it's really what really needs to be done is at a much bigger level. And that can only happen when we get referrals and when the parents themselves get wiser about these connections. So I think what we are doing today is just a small drop in the ocean, but we need to magnify these efforts.
And are these services available online?
Both, yes.
Both. It's hybrid. Yes. Dr. Tom wants to add something.
Yes, thank you. Look, for those in attendance today, you have some interest in this topic, obviously. So you may have a child with autism, a family member. The only way you're going to get a handle on this is to get educated. There's no other way. There's very few practitioners like Dr. Gupta's, both Drs. Gupta that are here. There's very few practitioners that have the big picture. You're going to have to get educated. Read the book, Camel Crazy. Read Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride's books. Read my books. But you have to get educated yourself. There's very few physicians that you can walk into their office and they're going to take care of your child and you can just be in the background. It's not going to happen. You have to get educated. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Dr. Gupta.
See, what is also required is that, as Dr. Tom said, most of the doctors and the professionals in this field say that we don't believe in diet.
Yes.
Sorry, because I have traveled across the country.
Yes.
I've worked for across the country patients, and I've taken the brunt with other colleagues of other fraternity. I know that. But let me tell you, people who believe in diet, they believe in diet. And to follow a diet, you have to believe in diet. Otherwise, you can't follow it. You can't pick it up one day, then do it for 2 days, and then do it for 5 days, and stop it. No, it takes time. So the important thing is that we have to educate in various conferences, webinars, seminars to medical fraternity, professionals, doctors, one thing. Simultaneously, parents who are interested and they don't have money to consult expensive doctors, including me also, is important. Expensive from the Indian perspective is important is that they can read on the net. They can read, there's so much good material is there on the net. They can become part of the support groups, the enough support groups who support the diet. And once they do it, take baby steps. As you know, as Christina was talking about, Dr. McBride was talking, take baby steps. See the improvements. Once you see the improvements, you start believing into it and then follow it gracefully. But do it systematically, maintain a diary, and believe into it. That's what I say to the parents. It can be very cost-effective, one of the most inexpensive, cost-effective modality if done in the right way.
And Dr. Gupta, I would, on that note, I would really like to add that whether believing in a diet or not believing in a diet, for that we need to talk to our own body, listen to our own body. While we are eating, we need to be mindful. We need to watch out how we are feeling about it. Only then we can believe in it or not believe in it. It cannot be just logical or a piece of information from internet or any book. We need to observe ourselves too.
But simultaneously, you need to make a beginning.
Right, of course.
After observing your body, listening to your body, make a beginning. Maybe one particular thing may not work you much. Absolutely. Maybe only the wheat, dropping of the wheat may not work. You need to drop the soya also, casein also. You may need to drop off some carbs also. So in that way. Yeah, Christina, please.
I, as a parent and as somebody that has seen, I think, thousands of children now from different countries, different cultures, both in person and online, I really have to just say that it takes a community to keep these families safe and to keep these children alive. This is a life-threatening disorder. Drowning, elopement, unfortunately, some people take their lives and things like that. It's a pretty severe issue. So some of the children do extremely well with diet interventions and therapy, and you will never know they're autistic when they grow up. It is really amazing. I've seen it many times, and I've seen these kids when they started. They look like someone hit them in the head with something, dazed, out of it. I never thought they could do what they're doing. Now I see them as young adults doing amazing things. Now, there is another type of this world that we're in where a lot of children may not respond that well on the outside. No matter the diet, therapies, medications, X, Y, and Z, they may not respond that well on the outside, or they may make some progress, but not a lot. But I will say, many of these children, they are cognitively in there intact. So you don't know until they learn to communicate, which can happen by, typing, texting, letterboard, whatever you have. So these issues, the diet, the medicine, the therapies, they may not look like they've had an effect on the outside of the functioning, but on the inside of their mind and their brain, I believe that has helped create that progress. And anything you can do to make these young adults and children more self-sufficient, even the smallest thing, is valuable in the long run. It may feel like it's not, but it is. If they are able to point to someone and say, that person hurt me, this is a risk, then that might help them. If they're able to do just the smallest thing, that might help them put food in their own mouth. So anyway, just trying to say, parents, we cannot expect a cure in these kind of situations. Sometimes we can expect what our goal is to make your child the best they can be and to not change who they are, to help them be who they want to be, who they're supposed to be. Okay, so that's the way I look at it.
Yes, thank you. Thanks a lot. So we move to the question answer session. There are plenty of questions on Zoom, but then I believe that there are certain questions which are already answered. So I would like to pick up some questions which are, I believe which will, it's good to discuss these questions because many of the participants may have such questions in their mind. So Komal Jain, she asked, antibiotics used in cold, cough and in fever, that is monosafe, azithral, she mentioned some names of the antibiotic. Does it affect an ADHD child? So are we not supposed to use antibiotics?
Well, that's a good question. It's a very good question from a concerned parent. And the rule of thumb is when you need medications, you use them. If you need to stop a process that's going on, you use them. And then you look at the damage that's been done by them and you work to rebuild a healthier microbiome. But antibiotics are not a first approach. A fever in a child is the child's immune system ramping up to fight something. You don't want to shut down a fever. Our rule of thumb is 103 or below Fahrenheit, 103, and you'll have to translate that into Celsius for India perhaps, but 103 or below is okay for a day or two. It's your child's immune system fighting something. If it goes above 103, 103.5, then we may consider an antibiotic, but not as a first response, not the first thing you do, unless it's over 103.5, and then perhaps you have to start with the antibiotic.
Thank you
And
so much. Yeah.
may I just add to that, that in India, we have a very good system of medicine called homeopathy. And there are lots of good homeopaths which are gentle on the system and they take care of these symptoms and you get well in almost as much time as you would with an antibiotic. So do have, be in touch with a good homeopath.
Yeah.
My son had a fever of 102 one morning when he woke up. My wife was very worried. I was very happy. I said, oh, great. She's like, what? I said, his immune system is responding to something. That's okay. Let's just monitor it very closely. And she was taking his temperature every 10 minutes, right? So it never went above 103. It lasted for one full day. He went to sleep. The next morning, it was gone. So a low-grade fever is okay for a short period of time. We think that we have to have our child with normal temperature all the time. Not true. It's the immune system trying to help protect the body.
Thank you so much. There is another question by an anonymous attendee. The question is not very clear to me, but I believe this is important. That the child, the attendee's child report shows aluminium and lead toxicity. So is it possible to cure, and the child also has got autism. So is it possible to cure autism by curing the toxicity level? I think that is the question, if I'm not very wrong.
Well, the answer to that is who knows? There may be 10 different triggers that have caused the inflammation in the brain, and you have to deal with most of them, whatever they may be. But if you have high levels of heavy metals like aluminum, like lead, yes, you have to get those out. And that may be what brings the child back over to more normal function. It may be, or it may be just a component that has to be addressed. You just have to begin the process and see. So the idea is identify the triggers and get that trigger out of there and observe the response.
True. Thank you so much. There is a question, there are a couple of questions for Dr. Natasha, but as Dr. Natasha had to leave for another webinar, I would request the other panelists to take it up if possible. So the question is, everything today we buy it from supermarkets. So what to avoid and what to buy?
So you have to just start looking at the cleaner labels with foods which are not laced with chemicals and additives which you don't understand. if they are simple ingredients which you understand and are not, loaded with salt or sugar or trans fats, or artificial colors and all of that. So I think we basically just look out for excessive sugars and these chemical additives, and even if it's on the supermarket, it can be safe for you. A lot of people also say, oh, anything with a Tetra Pak is a packed food and we shouldn't have it. It's not the case for everything. Certain forms of good food, maybe even vegetable purees and coconut milk, and the Tetra Pak packaging is not that toxic. So it's out of a box in a supermarket can be all right. But essentially things which are processed meats, processed fats, refined oils, and all the snack food, which is, which is the most commonly fed to children, and the trans fats, which come through the bakery products and all of that, those should be clearly avoided.
Thank you so much, Ishi. There is another question by Mr. Adhikari. In organic acid test, if oxalic acid marker is high, should oxalic food be totally restricted?
Dr. Deepak, are you using the organic acid test?
Yeah. So, yeah. So in that way, definitely oxalates can be increased either because of, definitely it indicates that there's a gut dysbiosis happening. It can be because of the yeast also. It can be because of the foods containing high oxalates can be there. So what I recommend is that to work on the gut dysbiosis simultaneously, if the yeast markers are also high, I tend to bring down the yeast markers and through diet, or if required through the anti-yeast medication. And also simultaneously, initially I tell them to cut down the food which is high oxalates. But still, if the oxalates doesn't come down, then I tell them to go to remove even the medium oxalates. And still, if it doesn't come out, then only completely, which is a very tough to do to remove all the oxalates. So usually I tell them to go for the low oxalate diet, LOD, low oxalate diet, to follow them and simultaneously work on the gut dysbiosis and the yeast also. I'm able to get success. Sometimes using certain supplements, which binds to oxalates can be used, which has a citrate component to it. So binding to them can be used so that they can take out those oxalates from the body. So in that way, using those supplements also can help you. So that holistic approach can be followed. Yes, Dr. Tom.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gupta. So there is a question by Harini.
Tom wanted to say something.
Dr. Tom wanted to say something.
Oh, I'm so sorry, I missed out. Yeah.
That's all right. Thank you so much. If you have a test result with high oxalates, what you have is you've got a problem. So the question is, where are the high oxalates coming from? Is it the food you're eating? Is it my digestive capability? Is there some other contributing factor? We don't know. So you have to explore, as Dr. Gupta was saying, he tiers it, which is great concept. Our friend Dr. David Perlmutter just wrote a book last year on high oxalates. It's called Drop Acid, or uric acid, which happens when you have high oxalates. And when you read this book, he is telling us exactly what Dr. Gupta just said, but he's giving you more elaboration on all of the concepts. And it's the same thing we're saying. You have to look for the triggers of inflammation, reduce those triggers of inflammation, and that if you have high uric acid levels, high oxalates, then likely here are some of the contributors to that. And he goes through the whole checklist. So once again, it's education. It's becoming, but you found a marker that's out of balance. Wonderful. It's not to say, oh, darn, no, good for you. You now have found something that you can focus on to reduce, to create less inflammation in your body.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tom. So there is a question by Harini Varadarajan. She mentioned that I tried camel milk from Camel Charisma for 3 months. No change in my kid. I gave raw camel milk. My kid has no constipation, but has dark circles all the time. My kid is a complete non-responder to any of the holistic biomedical intervention, no positive or negative effect. Should I still continue with camel milk, hoping for some changes? This question is for Christiana.
Thank you for that question. I think it sounds like you're doing a fantastic job with your child. So there was a study that came out of University of Nebraska a few years ago. It showed that with testing of autistic kids, you could determine the cause of autism somewhere in the range of 40 to 70% of the time. I thought that was pretty staggering. So I don't know how that's carrying through today. However, there are many, as we've discussed, subtypes of autism. There are many factors of autism. So we'd have to go back and kind of unpeel the layers in your son's birth, in the pregnancy, in his early manifestations, in his motor skills, and things like that. We'd have to see where his etiology of symptoms is coming from. So that would require a really good workup. Now, it does seem that there might be some complex factors at play. You say he has dark circles all the time. Maybe that can be hereditary. However, you seem like you've done everything you can to see if it's resolved from biomedical aspects. I will say, though, have you lowered sugars and increased proteins? The consumption of sugars and sweets and like rice and things like that, that can cause some yeast overgrowth if you have too many carbohydrates and not enough proteins. So I would say take another look at that. I would also ask, going to get a little interesting here, but is there a ring around his anus area? Because that can show if they're inflamed and if there's yeast and things like that. So if there is, then that shows he might be still getting too many sugars. And have you done an antifungal? Like a mild antifungal such as nystatin might be good to give him a course of that to rule out, is this a fungal overgrowth that we're having? So these are kind of complicated questions, but you have medical people here that you can actually go see and get a workup from. And I would continue with the camel milk if you can afford it and if it's fine for you, because you're giving him the very best nutrition that you could possibly give him.
She may also, that's fantastic, Christina, but I just wanted to add, if she hasn't done a food intolerance test, she could do that as well.
Yeah. Oh, and I also think one of the situations to note, because we're talking about India here, 1/3 of children approximately in India, and I'm not saying your child sounds very fortunate, but 1/3 of the children in India suffer from either wasting or being underweight and being stunted. And so giving that protein and giving the calcium, which you can obtain from animal milks that you do not get from plant milks, is very, very important for children in India in general. So it sounds like your child does not have this issue, but for others listening, let's make sure that we're looking at that as a factor in their overall health. And some of the camel milk is used for height growth in India among the consumer population.
Thank you so much. Thank you. A continuation with from the last question, the attendee also added that kindly explain the process of heavy metal chelation. My child has been told to go for heavy metal chelation. Anyone wants to respond?
See, as Dr. Thomas already said, that if you're getting a finding, that means there's an alarm. It's a good thing. That's why I tell to the parents, if you can afford, get the testing done. If you can pick it up, very good. That means, and it all depends what profile of testing you have done. Have you picked up only lead, aluminum, you picked up mercury, you've picked up arsenic, cadmium, depending on what have you picked up. So according to that, it is, I can't explain in 1 minute, but I can't explain in this 1 minute, but I can tell you briefly in this 1 minute. Once the practitioner identifies that there are certain heavy metals in the body, so he starts working on that. But you have to see the other factors also. The gut is ready for it or not. You just can't bombard with the chelation. So the gut has to be ready first thing. Along with that, once the gut is ready, and you have to see the methylation support is there. You have to see the oxidative stress has gone down. And then you identify, you educate the parents how much they're ready for chelation. Chelation is not one-day affair. There are multiple types of chelations are there. Some are natural chelations, some are low-dose chelation, some are normal chelations. In normal chelation, different routes are there: oral, rectal, subcutaneous. This rectal and IV. Other various are there, and through dermal. There are different types of there. As per, after you educate the families, as per the convenience and the availability of the chelating agent, you start the process. Sometimes you start with one process, you don't see good improvement. You move to the next one. Sometimes you start with the process, you see the improvement, but you get side effects. That means you need to modify the dose. And you need to add the other support of essential nutrients, essential minerals, yeast support, liver support, adrenal support. All that has to be put into place. So putting a chelation, it's a process. It is not like just putting one painkiller or putting one antibiotic. Clear? Yes. So in that way, you can do it. So if that person is open for it, he should consult the right practitioners and then work with it. Simultaneously, again, the parent has to educate himself, because a lot of ups and downs goes. It has to be gone for at least few months or at least 1 or 2 years minimum, the chelating process. You can't. But yes, if heavy metals can be chelated out, my experience says it works and children improves. But it is not only in one process. It's a holistic approach with gut, methylation support, oxidative stress, and along with the chelating agents. All has to be put into place together, because that all contributes to it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gupta.
Yeah, Dr. Tom.
Yeah. So with this
That
is the
was
yeah.
I wanted to say something. It's always good to hear from Dr. Tom. Yeah, it's icing on the cake. It's icing on the cake. Yeah.
Well, I just want to say that was a brilliant answer. And it gives everyone an appreciation that it's not so simple as just taking a pill. That the body that has accumulated the heavy metals in this example has to be not functioning adequately, because we're all exposed to heavy metals. Why do some bodies accumulate it and other ones don't? There have to be some detox systems out of balance. So you can't just pull the metals out. You have to balance the body that is holding those metals. So that was a brilliant answer. And I hope it gives everyone an appreciation that it's a complicated process to do. And you want practitioners like Dr. Gupta, who have spent hundreds of hours in training to understand these principles and been working at this for years to get it done. It's not a simple weekend course for a doctor to take to learn how to do this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tom. So I think we will be ending this session with a very simple question, but I think it's very important for the parent, that how long should we wait for diet to work? I have tried strict GFCA for 2.5 months, did not see any difference. How long should we wait?
Dr. Gupta, would you like to answer, or should I, because you have more experience?
There is no one solution.
Yes.
It's not one, we are fixing it with identifying the body and the gut. Correct? So we need to see that if one thing has not worked, we have a full box, like Christina said. She tried many doctors, she tried so many people. Final camel milk was a turning point, because it has immunoglobulins, it has calcium, it has anti-inflammatory property, it has it is immunoenhancer, it has vitamins, it has calcium, it has so many good things. Correct? That's what. So it is not that. And don't expect miracles, that it will happen miracle like a minute. It is a journey. What may suit one child may not suit to another child. What may work for one child, it may not work for another child. So you start with one diet, you go for another diet if it is not working. You tried, but along with that, there are certain symptoms and there's certain signs and symptoms which tells you this diet may work more better for this particular kid. Correct? If oxalates, yes, it can be high oxalate. If yeast issues, it can be a yeast diet, it can be a SCD, specific carbohydrate. If those are not working, it may be gaps also. correct? A lot of times we are not following it diligently. We are not following it 100%. We are saying we are almost following the diet, but we are giving certain ingredients like oil. Oil may be refined oil. Right? We are giving certain fruits and vegetables which may not be organic or which may be having certain contaminations. So in the end, may not be the pure complete we are following it 100%. So we need to follow it 100%. Then only we can say it's not working. Remember, for gluten also, 2.5 months is too less. Sometimes gluten can come out in 1 to 3 months. It can take 2 to 4 months or even 6 months also. It can take. It is not like 2.5. So have patience when you're working with diet. Maintain diary. Consult a good support group. A parents who got success. I have a lot of parents who have got success, whose children have recovered. So I refer them to them. I said, this is what I can offer you, but please talk directly from the horse's mouth, who have got recovered their kids. So I link them. I've taken permission from those parents. I put them to those parents if they're open for it. Very clear. I tell them in that way. And along with that, if they can afford a good nutritionist, I do refer them to a good nutritionist who are educated, who knows about this. So this is what I can say. But a lot of patience, and have patience, and simultaneously, do you also follow the diet? Don't just expect the child to follow. This is what I always tell to the parents. Don't just expect the child to follow the diet. You as a parent also follow, because then you can also understand how diet is working with your child and your family. You can identify certain nuances which you can't identify sometimes with a child. So in that way, it becomes a comprehensive family approach. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Ishi, you want to add something? Yeah.
You just that when you're maintaining a diary, you maintain a food diary and a symptom diary. So do both, and that really helps. And secondly, it's sometimes not only gluten, it could be other grains, as I said earlier. So seek professional advice, and maybe you will get good results.
Thank you so much. So what we gather from today's 2-hour discussion is that it's no magic. It requires very hard work, patience, and observing yourself, observing the kid, and observing the practices around, and then seek advice from the specialists. So it's a journey. It's no magic. It's not going to happen in just one moment or in 1 week or 1 month. And I believe, as Dr. Tom mentioned, that all of us, we need to educate ourselves at the very beginning. We need to learn a lot of things, because many of the things that we discussed today is very new to us, to the participants who are listening today. So it's very important that we educate ourselves. There are path-breaking books by the esteemed speakers here today, and those books are available online, and their research works are available online. So we have the opportunity to read those materials, to learn from it. And I believe the panelists that we have today, they are extremely approachable online, so we can connect to them. So what we all need is to invest ourselves to the aspect of nutrition, diet, and to believe that it can potentially change the difficulties in our children or any of the family members. So that's the journey. I believe today's 2 hours, it was exemplary, and I believe this can change life to many of us, and we will be able to pick it up from here and take it forward and meet these wonderful professionals very soon, all over again, for a longer talk and discussion on the same topic. Thank you, everybody. Over to you, Arjun.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, doctors. By far the longest webinar that we have ever conducted. And needless to say, the inputs that you all have given should help people. It's a journey, like Dr. Gupta said, and you got to start somewhere. Don't expect miracles on day 1, day 10, or even day 100. Some of this might be lifelong for many people. But the important thing is to follow the regime and stick to it and not take up things on a piece by piece or a piecemeal approach. So as always, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us on this lovely webinar, informative as ever. And we look forward to the next round of round 8 with Mrs. Shikosla, Tom O'Brien, and the other doctors. Thank you all and see you soon. Have a good night. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
A recording of this
Thank you.
webinar will be made available, and it will be available on Novivel. It will be available on the CSI website and on YouTube on the JMitra channel for anyone to view. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.